guys, welcome back to VFX Essentials. My name is Gregory Harrington, and today I'm going to show you how to CG composite. So if you look on my screen right here, we can see what exactly we're going to create today. So this is a Lego Batman, and I have a background of some Lego bricks with a Batman signal behind it. Now if you want to do this project yourself, I actually got this model off of Turbo Squid. I bought it for $24, and then I took it into Maya and I lit it, rendered out all the CG passes, and right now I'm just going to show you how to put together all those CG passes and how you would typically comp something like this. So I'm going to go ahead and jump inside my my nuke script. I'm going to go up top here. And this is my raw lighting I did inside of Maya. You can see it looks nothing like the final composite that I just showed you. Now when I did this, I grabbed some reference images. We can see we have like a Batman doing a kick right here. And then we have this image right here. And I particularly like these, the shape of these eyes. I also have this one right here. You can see how they have like this curve to it and this glow. Well, in the model I have, we can see that it doesn't have the same shape right here. So I'm going to show you a trick also later how to reshape these eyes and basically re-UV the model. So that'll be a later trick I'll show you. But first, let's talk about the very basics of CG compositing. If we look over here, I have all my passes broken out. And basically how you do this is you create a shuffle. You hook it up to your main beauty pass right here. And what we do is, in this area right here, we just go ahead and shuffle out each one. So this would be my diffuse right here. Now to make this tutorial quicker, I'm not going to go ahead and shuffle out each single one because they'll take forever. So I already did it right here. We see we have them all named. I'm going to go over quickly which each one does. So first off, when you create a shuffle node, you hook it up here or to your image. If you hit Alt-P, it'll give you a thumbnail of what the image is. Also, so this is my first one right here, my diffuse. When you use a shuffle node, I found a neat trick where if you go into the node tab in the label, and if you type this in right here, it's bracket value in, and then in bracket, and that'll actually give you the name of the layer right here. So again, if we create a shuffle, put it right here. This is like on default. I click, what is it? Diffuse. You can see we don't actually see anything. I'll hit Alt-P also. Like, it doesn't give you the name. So this will just help you organize doing this little trick right here. So just to go over each one of these passes, this is something called diffuse. It's basically like our base color, our basic color. And then we have diffuse direct, and we have diffuse indirect, where we don't really see anything in here. Sometimes you will though. So basically, these are Arnold passes, by the way. I tried to get the V-Ray trial, I couldn't get it to work on my computer, so I'm just using flat out Arnold. But basically, if you merge plus your direct and indirect passes, that's going to equal your diffuse pass. I know that sounds a little confusing, but it'll make sense when you build together your comp. This might be a better example for what I just explained. So this is our specular pass. We can see that what basically specular is when the light hits it, we get sort of a reflection. It's not quite a reflection, but it's like the hot spots that are bright and flash back towards the camera. So that's what this is, and we have the same thing. We have like a specular, we have a specular direct, and here we can actually see an indirect pass. So we can see the difference here. Like a direct is, well, more direct, and an indirect is kind of like the things that are kind of like in the crevices. I'm not 100% positive, but I think what it is it's like the specular bouncing off of one part of the polygon and then coming back to the camera. Like it's an indirect specular pass. So basically, if we look here, we have our direct specular and we have our mini specular. You can see the difference right here. And what we do is, like I mentioned before with the diffuse, which wasn't the best example, but I can show it right here. We merge plus these, and then we get this, and we get this, and you can see they're exactly the same. So that's what the difference between these two are. And what this does is it basically gives us a control. So if I add a grade here, and just, this is just for an example, I'm going to show you how to properly color correct these in a little bit. But if I take this and I gain up that, and then I plus on top of it, I'm only gaining up the direct part of the specular. Now for the next thing, what we have is our light selects or light groups. In V-Ray, if I remember correctly, they're called light selects. In Arnold, they're called light groups. So basically what that is inside of Maya, I have different lights set up around Lego Batman. And we have different, what I did was I separated each light into a different render pass. So right here we have a key light, we have a fill light, we have a rim light, we have like I named it screen right fill light, and a screen right rim light. So basically, if we merge plus all these together, that's going to be our entire lighting pass. Oh, and one thing I forgot to mention is this is called our beauty pass right here. So basically, it works differently in different rendering softwares. For something like V-Ray, it gets a little more complicated where we have like reflection and specular. But for this one, if I just combine my diffuse and my specular, we get the same exact thing as our beauty. So it's pretty simple, just two passes, but in other rendering softwares, it could be a couple more. But I'm going to show you a different way to composite it by basically subtracting each render pass, color correcting it, and then re-adding it in. So anyway, back to this, we have our light selects, and this isn't, we really shouldn't add multiple inputs, but just for a quick example, I'm going to add all these together. I'm going to hit plus, and we can see that all of our lighting is now added together. You can see each light select actually includes our diffuse and specular, but it's just doing it where the light is actually hitting it from each separate light I created. So now for the second one, this is the shadows. I honestly didn't get this to work correctly out of Arnold. But basically, sometimes if you have a lighter render this out for you, you can get something like a shadow matte, and you can use that matte to color correct the shadows. Unfortunately, that didn't work for me, but yeah, hopefully that helps you in some way. So for our next part here, we have our depth channel. If we look, we can see like there's nothing in here. What's going on? That's because in our viewer, we're going to switch this from RGBA, and we're going to switch it to our depth. And I'm accidentally on the alpha, so I'm just going to hit A. And now we can see that everything is red. And you're like, what is that? What's going on here? If we gamma it down, or gain it down rather, we can start seeing our information right here. Now if we hover over, we can see over here, which is the farthest back it is, and we see the red in almost 10,000 really. So that's basically because it's like infinite back here. Then we go over here, and this is like the mid ground right here. We can see we get like 22, 20, 21. Then we go up here to the foot, and that's like 10, 11, something like that. So basically what this is doing is these color values are giving the position in Z depth. So we can later use this information to create a zDefocus. And we'll go over that later. So just to hurry things up, this is another channel. Just remember to switch your viewer back to RGBA. Switch this back. So this is just our alpha channel. It's pretty simple. This is our multi-mat. Oh, I'm sorry, ID mat. In V-Ray it's called multi-mat, in Arnold it's ID mat. But basically same idea. So what I did was I made the cape red, I made his body green, and I made his face blue. And when we do that, what we can do is we can create another shuffle below it and just select everything red right here. And what that'll do is it'll give us a perfect mat of just the cape. You do the same thing with the body, and do the same thing with the face. Let's see that. Okay. So the next thing is, it's a pretty cool trick that I found. It's called the position pass, and using PositiontoPoints. Now this doesn't really have anything to do with actually compositing the CG render passes itself, but instead it actually gives you a point cloud. If we look here, we can see an accurate point cloud in 3D space. Now with looking at this, what we can do is later, if we had to do extra fixes or something like that to it, what we could do is we could put a card and animate it, and we can adjust it according to the point cloud. That way we can adjust anything we're actually doing. So just to show you this really quick, it's called PositiontoPoints. It's the node, and it's pretty simple. All you do is you hook this input up, and this is going to just a regular read node. Then as soon as you hook that up, we'll get another input, and it'll be the positions. So I'm gonna, oops, sorry, that's the normals. So we hook it up to the position. And by the way, this is what the position pass looks like. And it's similar to what the Z depth is. The color information is giving us XYZ data. So that's pretty cool. So we go ahead and we hook that up to PositiontoPoints, and let's disable that. And click one over here. Huh, I guess it already creates a positions right here. But it does give you another input right here, which is for the normals. So I'm going to hook that up. And that's basically all you really have to do. Just need your normals and position. And I guess maybe you actually don't need your normals. Maybe the normals just give you a little more information for your point cloud. But anyway, that's how that works. So let's go ahead and start getting compositing. So if you look at our raw image, and what we're going to do is we're going to change it to where it looks something more like this. which is a lot better than what we originally had. Alright, so the first step we're going to do is we're going to create this little section right here. And what we do is we go down into our B pipe, we shuffle out one of our passes, we pull it over here for one pipe, and we also subtract that same render pass from our B pipe. And then over here we're going to color correct it, and it's important to unpremult, grade, and then repremult. If you don't do this, you'll start getting black edges. So that's very important. And then what we do is we plus it back over. So basically our B pipe, then we shuffle our render pass right here, and then we subtract it with a merge minus. So this is what what it looks like with all the passes combined, but without the diffuse inside of it. And then what we do is we color correct it and merge plus it. Now I'm going to go ahead and create this from scratch for you, so you completely understand how it works. So the first step is to go ahead and create a shuffle. And the reason I want you to do this is I want you to create like some sort of your own setup for it. So I'm gonna go ahead and shuffle that out, the diffuse. I'm gonna go ahead and put a bracket here, and I actually forgot what the thing was, value in. So just put that here, type that in here, value in. Now we can see it says diffuse. I'm gonna hit Alt-P. Now what we're gonna do is go ahead and create a dot here, create a dot here. And this will go a lot faster in just a second. I'm basically showing you this setup so you can copy paste it over and over. And then make sure this is your B pipe, that's why it's set up this way. So B is down, A over here, and then switch this to minus. Go ahead and look at it and see that your diffuse is missing, but all your other passes are combined. And what we're going to do is create a dot over here. Go ahead and create an unpremult. A grade. And another premult. Create another dot. And then a merge plus. Now I don't want you to touch the color correct just yet. I just wanted you to create this really quick, so you can just copy this setup right here. Oops. Paste it again. And then go ahead and change this to your next pass. So the next pass is diffuse direct. Copy that again, paste it. Change this to diffuse indirect. And basically we're going to keep doing that for every single pass. I would skip the motion vector. I'm going to show you that in a little bit. Go ahead and skip the shadows. Your specular you want to do. And I'll just go ahead and start going down my own pipe. So I'm going to go ahead in my script, I'm going to delete this, and I'm just going to go back over here. So we can see we have our diffuse missing, and then this is the diffuse we added. So what I did was, this is it on default, so I created a grade. So you can see right here what I did was I I just played with the gain right here to give it a better color. So if you go in here in your grade, you can just kind of like up the color. I was trying to get more of a yellowy out of this. So for yellow, we can either add red and green to make the yellow. We can also pull some blue out. You can see I'm making it really yellow right here. And this is basically what I was going for. I'm going to go ahead and keep what I originally had and see the difference right here. And after I keep going down, a lot of these aren't actually color corrected, but I just have the control right here. So in this first backdrop, we see this is the diffuse. So this is diffuse, diffuse direct, and diffuse indirect. And now if we keep copy pasting the setup, now we're in the specular area. So this is specular, specular direct, and specular indirect. And we can see over here, we have an alpha here. It looks like I didn't do any color corrects for the specular. Oh, but I did do it for the indirect. Did I do it for the direct? Okay, so it looks like what I did was I toned down the specular, and I did it differently. So for the direct, I made it 0.5, and for the indirect, I only pushed it down to 0.8. So that's a good example of different control you can have over the specular, because you have two different areas that you can control. So for the next part, I'm going to go over more interesting passes in a second, but I'm just going to run through this really quick. Alright, so we have the light selects or the light groups I showed you earlier. Same exact way. This is our light groups. We have the key light right here. And it looks like I changed the color. Oops. Just look at it right here. Looks like I changed the color temperature to more of a bluish. Just wanted to get a better look for it. So I'm going to go ahead and skip this part. It's pretty self-explanatory. Basically just changing the color overall. So for right here we have a room light. And I actually can't quite remember what I was doing here. It looks like, okay. So it looks like what I did was I took my ID mat, and this is what I was showing you earlier. Take the ID mat, I shuffled it all in red, so I'm just doing the cape. I'm gonna look right here, see what I'm doing. I disable grade. It looks like what I was doing was I was trying to make the cape more yellow. And just to remind you guys, this is my final comp. So it looks like I was trying to bring more of the background into the cape. Now I feel like you guys might be getting a little bored at the second, so just gonna quickly go down here. This is the next one. And here's the next light group. Alright, so now here we go. This is the normals pass. So for the normals pass, we see this is a good way to basically relight your CG model in comp if you don't want to bring it back to the 3D software. So I actually found this from another tutorial. There's certain gizmos and other things, but I wanted to keep this non-commercial nuke. Basically, you can just do this, anyone can do this for absolutely free, learning nuke and things like that. So basically I learned this from another tutorial. I thought it was pretty cool. What they did was they created an axis. They created a color matrix. And I'm going to switch this to 2, just so you can see them both. So we have our axis and our color matrix. And if we look here in our axis and we go to local matrix and we go to specify matrix, we basically want our information from this local matrix to go into our axis. So basically to do that is I'm going to, I think it was like Control Shift to this area right here. Oops, I guess I was wrong. We're basically trying to link it. So go ahead and under your axis, under Specify Matrix, go ahead and link this to your axis and go one by one. Now, just to see if I did that correctly, I'm going to go ahead and uncheck Specify Matrix. And I'm going to go ahead and scroll in the Rotate X. And we can see our numbers are changing, so this is working correctly. So now I'm going to hook this up to our normals. And I'll look right here. And what I'm going to do is, seems to be something I'm forgetting. Oh, it looks like these three are 0 right here, so I did something wrong. There we go. So sorry about that, I just linked this one incorrectly. So if you look back here to our color matrix, we're actually right here to our axis. Uncheck this and go back. You can see it's changing. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go a lot higher. We can see that I completely changed the colors on this. So if I go lighter, you can see that I'm subtly changing the colors in this. So what you do after is you have another shuffle mode, and you can pick which color we want. So we have red, green, and blue. And this is more purpley just because it's mixing between the blue and the red. So I'm going to shuffle it out, and we get just a red, and now it'll give us an alpha right here. We can also just play with the alpha a little bit, just gain it down a bit. I chose to add this color to my comp. So what I'm doing is I'm putting this in the B channel, using my normals as an alpha. It looks like I blurred it a bit, and then I plussed it back over. If we look here, I now have an orange light that's shining over him. Now this is a cheap 2D way to do it. If a light was shining over here, we wouldn't get all this light inside of his leg. But, you know, this is a cheap way to actually work with it. So with this setup, we can see it's kind of like an extra light group that we're just adding on top of it. So for the next thing I'm going to show you is I color corrected the mouth. I think this is kind of self-explanatory at this point, but I'm going to just run through it really fast. So we can see here at the ID map, I shuffled the blue out, I unpre-multiplied it, and it's actually important you unpre-multiply your ID map. Same reason as the color effects. It can cause black edges and things like that. After I did this, I just rotated around the mouth because I didn't want to include the eyes. So I got that right there. And then I just did the basic thing where I subtract this information from our CG render, and then I color corrected it and added it back in. So we can see we have the color corrector right here. Now moving down, this is something a little more interesting. So basically, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to create the the glowing eyes. If you remember from earlier, I was talking about this right here. We can see that we have like certain shapes of the eyes, and we also have them glowing, as compared to our render right here, where everything is actually white up here, and it's just shadow. Basically, they didn't texture the eyes itself. So going back to the bottom, I did basically the same thing we did with the mouth. So we have our ID mat, shuffled out the blue, I think it was. Go ahead and pre-multiplied it. Rotoed out the mouth this time, so it's just the eyes. I have another one pre-multiply. And what I did right here was I created my own mat for the shape of the eyes. Now, in order for you to do this, you would need the geometry, and you would also need like a UV map or a UV texture, just to kind of get the idea of where the information is. So basically, I have the geometry right here. I'm going to go ahead and load it in, just so you're a little more familiar with ABCs. I'm going to load it right here, back in Geo. And then we get this dialog box right here. Now what this is going to do is it's going to bring in all of my geometry. We don't need this axis right here. So I'm going to go ahead and click this. And we can see our geometry. And the thing is, because we're going to adjust the head, we don't actually need all this geometry. So if we go to Scenograph, we can see all of our geometry inside of a group. So certain things like the left leg, we can click that off. The right leg, we can click that off. If we pull down upper body, we can uncheck body. We can uncheck the waist, the right arm, the left arm, and the fabric, which is the cape. And now what I can do is in head and mask, I can uncheck the mask. So this is just the Lego head itself right here. And we can see now we have like a good area of where the eyes would be. So now what I'm going to do is on our texture, I put this reformat here. It's not necessarily necessary, but you want the texture to go into BG, and that will basically reformat your roto to be in place. And on my roto, I started shaping the eyes of what I thought it would be. Now the blue isn't necessary. If we go to our alpha, this is all we actually care about. I'm just actually building a mat for the eyes itself. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hook that up. Well, basically I'm going to draw it straight on the texture itself, so I know the position. Then I'm going to plug it into our geo, plug it into the scene. We also have to have a camera. Sorry, I forgot to mention that first, but we have to have our camera. And then we're going to plug it into the scanline renderer. Now, we can keep our scanline renderer with low samples and things like that. It's not necessarily, because all we're actually creating is the alpha. Looks like something happened. Well, it looks like when I was messing with this earlier, I accidentally turned off the head. So let's go ahead and turn that back on. This would have to be on to... sorry about this. Taking a little bit. Leg, right leg. Body. Alright, so sorry, I just had to recheck it. Make sure the geometry's there. If we go here, sorry guys, it looks like it's glitching out on me. So I'm just gonna hook up the one we just did over here. And that seemed to work. So I apologize about that. It looks like my older Regio just stopped working on me. So if we go down here, we look here, we can see that we have our alpha. We can see that the alpha is now moving. What I did was, to speed it up, I wrote it out as a PNG sequence, and I made sure that in my right node, we have RGBA selected. I then took that read node, you can see it right here, and I hooked it up to the color correct. So if we look here, you can see that I added this glow here, and I turned down the green and turned up the brightness, things like that. You can see here, without the glow, we can see that our new shape is right here. And I basically just did that by gaining down everything outside of the mat we had. I then blurred it a little bit. So that's basically how I did it. Hope that helps anyone. There would be different types of situations. You would have to re-UV some geometry, but it's always better to ask the lighter to go ahead and fix something that might be a big problem. But sometimes you can't do that also. So anyway, that's how you make the eyes glowing. So just to continue on, we now have an AO pass. An AO pass basically look like this, and it's basically just going to give us more realistic shadows. So what we do is we multiply that back over. On mine, I have the mix on 0.5. If we increase that, you can see it makes it significantly darker in certain areas. We usually use AO is basically something that happens in real life. It's basically the absence of light in certain areas on real objects. So basically, you could just, this wouldn't be included in your beauty render. It's an extra render you would render out, and you would just add it on top to make it look more realistic. So for mine, I decided 0.5 was the best look for it. And again, this was with a multiply operation. Now, when we continue down, we can see I added my alpha back into here. Again, just shuffle alpha. So anyway, continuing on, now we get to the cool stuff, the Z depth part. So I'm just gonna look here. I'm gonna shuffle out our Z. And you don't need to do this for the Z depth, but I just want to show you. If we look at our depth, again, switch this to depth. You can see it right here, and I talked about this earlier. Farthest is like 10,000. When we get closer, we gain this down. We can look at this. One thing you can do, I'm going to show this before we actually get into it, but we can shuffle out our Z depth. We can grade it. We can pick, like, our depth right here. And what we can do is we can just kind of play with it and change it like that. And then we can copy it back in later. We can change this to depth and then depth. And that would effectively color correct your depth channel. You see the difference right here. So I actually don't need to color correct my depth channel. So what we're going to do is we're going to go straight to the zDefocus. That was my wife. I got married, by the way, since the last tutorial. My wife just exited the room because I've been talking for a long time. So it looks like I am freezing my nuke a little bit. It's probably because I went straight to the zDefocus node and then also switched this, so it's probably too much. Just to be aware, I would save your script right now because the zDefocus does like to crash your nuke. zDefocus is pretty heavy, so please be careful with that. So we can see this is already my setup zDefocus, but for you guys, I need to set it up so you guys know how to use it. So I'm gonna do this pretty rough because this tutorial's been running a long time. I'm gonna go to zDefocus right here and switch this to 1 to prevent confusion. And we can see on default, this is what we have. Like, this is before zDefocus. On default, this is what I have. We have this thing right here, which is the focal point. This would be the most in focus part. This is our focal point that we want to look at. We can see it's automatically working. We can do different things like we have the focus plane right here, but this is actually set up by the focal point. So this number would change to where you put this. We have this, I basically only mess with these two settings, size and maximum. And I just go back and forth between these two. The more size or the more maximum you put on it, the heavier it'll get. And basically just always make sure the maximum is higher than the size. We see we cause some artifacts and things like that. So basically what I'm going to do is I remember the math I chose for this one ended up being the depth. And we can see it caused, it fixed our artifact issue mostly. So what you can do is just kind of like go back and forth between these. The only ones I've actually used are depth, var equals 0. I might have used var equals 1, but the reason there's different math equations for this is with different types of render software, they can render out the depth in different types of ways. So I already deleted my shuffle, but if we looked at our depth, remember when I was going back here and we saw like 10,000, this in a different render software, it might register as 0 instead of 10,000. And then I go over here, there's something like 10, maybe the other render software registers it as 10,000. So basically, there might be different algorithms and things like that that calculates the depth differently, and this is what basically that is. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and move on. A lot of times when you're playing with this, you'll get different artifacts. You just have to keep at it. If you get problems, I would try color correcting your depth. And really, it's just about like trying to balance it out. Oh, we also have some other controls down here. We have a bloom, and what that will do is basically, I guess this isn't a good example, but for the very brights, it will actually bloom out those brights for you, which would happen in real life with a big defocus. So you can play with these two things. See if I... Yeah, this frame is just not a good example of that. But you can play with these two and see for yourself. I have to move on because this has been a while. So anyway, for our next section, I'm going to go over motion blur. And this is the last section, by the way. So for my motion blur, you would typically just shuffle this out, but I accidentally messed up my motion vector channel. That's actually why I didn't cover it up here, because I had to render it separately from my master layer. So if we look at our motion vector channel, this is similar to the depth channel. We can see here, we got all this crazy information. Kind of like change it. You can see there's different values in there. And what this is going to do for us is this is going to run our vector blur to create motion blur for our CG composite. Now, in order to do this, you would either shuffle it out, or if it's a separate render like me, you would, well, it'd actually already be copied in if, you know, it's in your master image up here. But for me, I had to copy it back in. It was similar. I copied the motion vector red to motion vector red, and green and blue and so on. And then after that, what I did was I created the vector blur node. I'm going to go ahead and disable this because this will be pretty heavy. And what we have is an error. I'm going to switch this to none and then switch it back to motion vector. Input is missing motion vector. It's pretty strange because I'm viewing it right here. And we can see we get all sorts of problems with compositing. Compositing errors. So let's see. Motion vector. Alright, so what I'm going to do is I'm guessing that this node just broke on me basically. Oops, that's the wrong one. So I'm just going to create it from scratch because it is a pretty simple thing to do. And we just go here, vector blur, switch none to motion vector. I hope that works. You see, there you go, you just get random glitches and things like that. And so now it's actually working. Pull that over there. So come here, and all we do is this will be none on default. We just switch this to motion vector. It's lagging a bit now. And vector blur is another pretty heavy node. Now, my motion vector for this particular CG element was never very large. I'm going to go back to frame 5. What I'm going to do is I'm going to crank up my motion amount so we can hopefully see it better. We can see a little bit right here. See, there's our motion blur right there. Let's crank this up. You can see that it's giving us our motion blur right now. So that is basically how you would create a motion blur from your CG element. Now, it would be better if the 3D artist already rendered it with motion blur, because the 3D software gives you better motion blur. But if you come with certain problems where your CG composite is put in, and you keep getting black edges for your motion blur, which does sometimes happen, you can try this method where the CG artist would, for Arnold I had to do this, so it was a little confusing, but you have to turn motion blur on, and then in the render settings, also there's a different tab, and then you would turn motion blur off. A render artist or someone who rendered it for you might know exactly what I'm talking about. Basically what that would do is it would enable your motion vectors to render out that information for you. So that was about it. I will show you my background for a few minutes. What I did was I wrote it out. That way I can cache this a lot faster. I did this post repo, which basically means I just took a transform, scaled it up and back down a little bit to make it a little more interactive, make it a little more fun. I'm just going to run through this background really quick. I'm not going to cover the entire thing, but just to remind you, my final composite was this guy right here. So to make that, I made this constant, reformatted it. I just did some lighting. It's basically just a ramp with some rotor shapes. I made this shape up here, which is, I just traced the backend signal, and I connected these postage stamps up here. I just don't want it to spider web all over the place. For up here, I just made a circle with a reformat of 1K. I tiled it. Let's see here. Looks like my A button doesn't want to work. Okay, and then I reformatted it. Now it does work. So I reformatted it. I added this corner pin to it to make it feel like it's being pushed back. I did this transform thing. I basically just wanted to like stretch it out a little bit. So if we go here, we can see that I basically did a color correct for just the shape of the bat signal, and then I stenciled out the dots, and that'll make more sense in a second. This color correct is adding the dots itself, and basically the reason I did this is because in the shadows I don't want highlights happening in the shadows, but I still want the color itself of the circles to be in there. And that's something you should know as a VFX artist working realistically with shadows. Basically it's tuning out the highlights and a little bit of the midtones, but it's not making everything necessarily flat black or something like that. So anyway, keep going down. I'm not going to show all of those, but I created some shadows for right here. Made it more darker. I think I'm like spreading out the shadows a bit. I made some highlights around there, and I basically did this with like using the same shape of the circles and using a transform and stenciling it back out. If we move down, I basically used the same alpha, put some blue in there, did a basic transform. And we can see we got like our final image right here. I also have a big bounding box. I did that purposely. I basically scaled it by 1.25, and the reason I did that was I have my post repo, but only half of it I did an expression where I divide the curve divided by 4 plus 1. I'm basically just dividing the entire thing by 4 of this transform right here. I basically copied it, pasted it right here, edit expression, it already comes up with curve. I just typed in divide by 4. And what that basically does is just give me some parallax between Batman and the background. I then added the lens distortion. You see the script slowing down. I defocused it to match my zDefocus. And what you want to do is you want the opposite type of defocus to happen to your foreground. So basically, while this is in focus, this will be out of focus. So I basically animated it to be the opposite of what my zDefocus is. I then cropped it down, and merged on top. Now, because of this was so bright, I basically created my vignette first, and then I started playing with all these things. That's because I wanted a vignette to begin with, just because it's kind of like a cinematic thing, and then I did all the color corrects before it. And that's basically the look we got. So let's go ahead and look at the final composite. And that is basically my tutorial, guys. So this is what I came up with. I hope this tutorial helped you. I'm just trying to go as quickly as possible. Sorry it was long. So that's about it. That's how you CG composite. For this particular tutorial, I used Arnold. I prefer other render software like V-Ray. But this is basically what I came up with, and I hope it helps everyone out there to basically CG composite, work with different lighting, color correct certain things, and just basically hope it helps everyone out there. So that's about it. Thank you. Please like and subscribe. I work hard on these videos, so just kind of share them around, and hopefully it helps someone. Alright, thanks guys, and I will see you guys next time.